Hello and welcome to the garden. So in this video, part of the tomato grafting series, it's finally time for me to pot on the grafted plants. So these were grafted 19 days ago, and ideally I would have potted these on a few days ago. However, the propagators have been filled with stuff that I haven't been able to move out because of the cold nighttime temperatures we've had lately. So when I did the grafting, I kept back a certain number of the varieties from which I want to save some seed. So anything I wanted to save seed from, I kept at least one plant back to make sure that I would have something to save from in case the grafting didn't go well. And then there were some other plants that I couldn't graft because I couldn't find matching rootstock. So that's something I need to adjust a little bit, the timings for next year to help me get the rootstock and the scion to the same sizes for grafting. So I've got a few plants that didn't go through that process, and the day after I did the grafting I potted them on, and I potted them into quite large pots, and as you can see these are producing some pretty substantial plants. So this is the Belmonte Costelluto, and here I've got Pantano, and I'm really happy with these plants, but I've been having to keep the cold temperatures of them, particularly at night, and that has delayed me potting on the grafted plants a little bit. So now the real cold looks like it's passed. We're getting down to 0 or just maybe -1, and I think I might get away with moving these now into the greenhouse where I've got some extra protection ready for them. So the grafted plants are rather smaller in stature than the ungrafted because of course the grafting process sets these back a couple of weeks. I removed a lot of the top growth when I grafted them, and it takes quite a while for these to heal and start to grow away again. Now they are growing away now, and quite nicely, so I'm quite happy with these plants, but they do need potting on. Now one of the important points when potting on is to keep this graft union clear of the soil, because you don't want the scion to root into the soil, because if it does you'll lose then the benefits of disease resistance that you're getting from the rootstock. So when I pot these on, I will make sure that this graft union is 1.5 to 2 inches above the soil level. So this one won't be set much deeper. This is a San Pierre. This one is a Canestrino de Luca, and in this case I will set this one a lot deeper in the pot. So I will move these on into fairly good sized pots, so at least a litre. This is a 1 litre pot, and that's I think a reasonable size to move on from these 7cm pots with this grafted plant. So the first job is to move these other tomatoes down into one of the big greenhouses where I think I can keep the temperatures reasonable for them. So I'm in one of our larger greenhouses now, and this already provides reasonable protection. We've got the greenhouse and the almost south-facing wall. But I'm putting the plants in this ratty old box here. Now, we've used this for many years, specifically for this purpose. When you get to the point where you can't keep the plants in a heated propagator anymore, but it's not yet safe to set them out in the beds in the greenhouse, then they go into this box. So this is just made from some 10mm twin wall polycarbonate. So I've set out the tomato plants in here, and if need be I can always cover them with some fleece within this box. I've had a little temperature sensor in the box for the last few days, and also one outdoors, and I'm finding a consistent level of protection of about 4 degrees in this box. There have been a few evenings recently where the temperature outside has dropped to, let's say, -1.5, and the temperature inside this box here has been +2.5. So I'm pretty confident now with the weather situation and the forecast for the next few weeks, I'm pretty confident that we will certainly be able to keep the frost off of these. So I'm not worried about that. The temperature will inevitably be a bit low for them. So it would be good if I could keep the temperature above about 10 degrees Celsius, even better above 12 or 13 degrees. That's not going to happen. The temperature at night is sure to dip below that. I would expect this to dip to 3 or 4 for the next few days, but there's nothing I can do about that. I no longer have enough heated space to prevent that. So these have now freed up space in one of the propagators so I can pot on the grafted plants. These are just going to have to put up with conditions here. Now, I know that is the sort of touted minimum temperature for the tomatoes, but to be honest, I haven't found it that critical in the past. That temperature is only going to dip down for a short period of time. Now, you really do have to keep the frost off them. Frost is a no-no with tomatoes. But I've never had a problem with them in this insulated box here. And certainly I'm sure if we cover them with fleece during the night, they're going to be fine. Now, you'll always know if your tomatoes have got a little bit too cold because they will tend to develop a bluish tinge to the leaves. So you can quickly see if they're not happy, but even then they will, in due course, pick themselves up and recover. I suppose that cold gives them a check in growth that if you can possibly avoid it, that is the best thing to do. But as I say, I've never been in a position where I can keep them heated all the way up until the point where I plant them out. And if you're looking for a moment in the calendar when you can actually set them out, even in a greenhouse here in the south, and guarantee more or less a minimum nighttime temperature of 10 degrees, I probably wouldn't be putting these out until, well, certainly late May. And that's too late. These are going in at the end of April or early May, and that's when I always plant them. I will, of course, keep an eye on the weather forecast, and if for some reason there's another icy blast coming from the northeast, then I will delay that planting out. But I've never delayed it until sort of late May or into June. But if you look at the average minimum temperatures for your region, you'll see that to keep it above 10 degrees, especially in a polytunnel, but also here in the greenhouse, you don't get a huge lift in the middle of the night from keeping them under glass or polythene. In fact, the temperature in a polytunnel can, during the night, can even go slightly lower than outdoors. It all depends on the conditions. So maintaining that sort of plus 10 to plus 12, that's not going to happen here. But as I say, they've always done fine, and I'm sure they will be coping with those conditions reasonably well. At least I hope so. I'll be disappointed if they don't. Right, on to the potting on. So the compost mix that the plants are in at the moment, that is pretty lightweight, and some of that I might, if it's loose, I will knock that off and replace it. I'm replacing it with a slightly more substantial mixture here. So this is going to give them more soil to get into, and importantly, a bit more of a feed. So as I pot these on, I'm going to be very careful. I'm not going to handle these above the graft union. I mean, I'll try not to touch the stem at all, but if I do touch the stem, I will touch the rootstock rather than the scion. And I'm going to leave these little clips on, these bits of tube, and they will hopefully come off naturally in a little while as the stem expands. Now, I'm sure that graft union is fully healed now, but I certainly don't want to risk damaging it. So I'm just going to handle these with a little bit of care. bit more care than I would perhaps use for non-grafted plants. You can probably make out that there's a nice fine network of roots here. It's certainly not pot bound yet, but this is the sort of stage where it's a good idea to move them on. They can get their roots out into a slightly richer compost mix, and that's going to help them develop nicely over the next couple of weeks. So I'm just going to rub off a little bit of that loose stuff from the top. I don't want to disturb the roots. Right, that will do. And just check the depth. And that's about right. So now I'm just carefully filling around. I'm gently packing this compost around. I'm not firming it in too hard, but I want to make sure there are no gaps down there. I don't want to be too rough with it. I don't want to damage any of those young roots if I can avoid it. And I'm a good 2 inches short of that graft union. So that one should be fine. All that needs now is a drop of water. And that one's fine. So this one here, I'm going to sink this one rather deeper into the pot because I grafted this much further up the rootstock than the other one there. I mean, ideally you'll graft the rootstock quite low and the scion quite high, but it all depends on the sizes of the stems, and I didn't get those absolutely perfect, to be honest. I will hopefully do better next year when I've adjusted my timing slightly. So I'll just put a small amount of soil down the bottom of this one. And it will root from the stem here as usual. You just don't want to bury the graft union. And again, I'll just pop off some of the soil that hasn't been rooted into yet. And I'll replace that with fresh. Okay, that will do. Now, if I had an even deeper pot, that would have been even better, but when I plant these out, I could set this down another maybe 1.5 inches, and that would be fine. Now, because I've grafted higher up the rootstock here, I will have to keep an eye on this and make sure no shoots are coming from the rootstock. I've just pulled one off there. So that's all there is to it, really. I'm just potting those on. I will get those back into the propagator so that these can enjoy that minimum 10 degrees nighttime temperature, even if the ungrafted plants have to put up with the insulated box in the greenhouse. So anyway, that is all for this video. There will be one more in this grafting series when I talk about some of the lessons learned and what I might change for next year. And I dare say later in the season I'll be able to look at some of the other points of those grafted plants, how well they're doing in practice, and particularly if there are any signs of incompatibility between some of the varieties I've grafted and this particular rootstock, because that is always a possibility that there's a slight incompatibility that might cause a particular variety not to thrive or possibly even fail on that particular rootstock. But that is all for this video, so thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.